officially became a 501c3 in January of 2015, but we've been developing and working on the internal structure since 2013.
And what was, when it got started and when you got interested in it and they brought you on board, what was the concern? Because a lot of people they hear about human trafficking and they think about third world countries. Is there a lot of issues around here with third world, or with human trafficking?
There is, but no more than any other city. There are a lot of reasons why Racine may have maybe what we consider more of a problem, only because we are on the circuit that a lot of traffickers use to go between Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, North Dakota. So between Chicago and Milwaukee, obviously we're between those two cities. So that's a lot of the reason why I think that we started to really notice a problem. Back in 2013, investigator Neil Lofi was actually starting to work on human trafficking issues. He was in an Operation Cross Country in Milwaukee, which is a national FBI event that they do every year to rescue victims of human trafficking. And he realized that really we needed some more focus here in Racine. We needed some more training for our law enforcement, and we also needed to partner up with social service providers and really provide the aftercare to the victims that wasn't there.
Can you explain for people who don't know what kind of human trafficking happens in the U.S. and in this area?
Well, we do see labor and sex trafficking, obviously. Predominantly here, I would say we see more sex trafficking, and we see more sex trafficking with the female gender, although it can happen to both boys and girls.
So, in a recent Rolling Stone article on human trafficking, this professor from UC Irvine, her name, Jennifer Chacon, said that the restaurant industry is actually a common place to sometimes see human trafficking because of tip-based wages and stuff like that. It's harder to document workers in the restaurant world. Do you guys ever see anything with that in restaurants, or not really? I was curious about that.
Well, that's interesting because I haven't heard about it from the tip-based wage perspective. But yes, absolutely, you do see trafficking in restaurants. I would say predominant more in the ethnic restaurants, Chinese, Indian restaurants. We've seen a lot of that. But that's probably not as predominant here.
Right. And one of the biggest problems that I came across with human trafficking, and sometimes how victims get treated like criminals, sometimes by whether it be the U.S. government or some like local law enforcement around the U.S. and stuff like that. Is that true that happens? Can you touch on that at all? Like whether it's in a human trafficker is treated as if they were like a willing prostitute or a willing migrant laborer who was being, illegally immigrated here. Do you guys work to try to make sure that doesn't happen? Is that one of the things you guys do?
Absolutely. That's actually one of the reasons why we developed the way we have. The police department here in Racine felt very strongly that what is the point in rescuing a victim or calling them a victim if you're going to just go ahead and arrest them. So we make it a policy here in Racine, unless there is a specific reason that it has to be done, we do make it a policy not to arrest victims. One of the big issues also is, you hear about child prostitution. Well, there's no such thing as child prostitution. Unfortunately, it is illegal. It is human trafficking, and since a child cannot consent to sex, to arrest a child for prostitution is absolutely ridiculous, but it happens all the time in the United States.
I wanted to ask you, why exactly did you get into this field? Because it's a really tough job to do. There's a lot of times where it's like you have to. It's one of those jobs where you have to be right every time, and
right.
The saying goes like that. And so, why did you get into it?
That's a very good question. I don't really know if I have a good answer for that. I got into it just more recently because I was working with a group called Dining for Women, and it's a group that we look at women and children in poverty around the world and different issues that affect them. And it kept coming up, this human trafficking element kept coming up, and it was more on a global level. But when we looked at it as an organization, we thought, well, what does that look like locally? And we honestly didn't know. So we reached out to the Dominican Sisters, found out that they had been researching human trafficking for probably almost 10 years now. Got connected to the police department, realized they were beginning to really look at human trafficking as a crime here within Racine, and just really it kind of developed from there. So I would say I never set out to make a career out of being a human trafficking advocate, but that's sort of where I landed. I feel like a lot of it probably came from, I grew up in the South. I was very interested in the Civil War and very interested in slavery and emancipation, and I feel like it was just sort of a modern day fit for that interest.
So is there a moment, or are there various moments in your day-to-day or big picture career-wise that just like are really rewarding, where you just feel like you have like a sigh of relief and you go like, this is why I do this? Are there moments like that for you? And if there are, what are they?
Absolutely. I would say probably the biggest thing that really can be rewarding is to talk to a human trafficking victim. One of the things that I get to do as an advocate is when they are brought into custody with the police department, I have the opportunity to speak with them, kind of evaluate the situation, find out what services are needed for that particular person, and really being able to, I guess, touch the people who are suffering in human trafficking kind of keeps you going and makes the events and the marketing and the awareness and the education and the training all worthwhile.
Heading into 2016, still a new year. As an organization, you guys probably have some like resolutions and stuff, some new things you want to hit on. What are you guys doing right now to continue to bring those numbers down and have Wisconsin be less of a trafficking spot?
I think we know that education and awareness is the number one way to prevent human trafficking, and so we are really focusing and putting a lot of our energy into training. We want to make sure that we train law enforcement, caseworkers, social workers, educators, administrators, students, community members, medical personnel. We're just finding different and unique ways to really get the education in front of people, because we're realizing that people just don't realize that human trafficking exists all around us. It's a crime that's called hidden in plain sight for a reason, because human trafficking victims go to school, they go to church, they are in the community just like anyone else, and if you don't know what you're looking for, you may not realize that this person needs help.